Good morning, lovelies. I talk a lot about writing diversity on this channel. It is half the reason that I joined YouTube in the first place. But like with most things, there is a lot of misinformation out there about how to write diversity in genre fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. Or more specifically, how writers from majority groups can and should write characters from minority groups. So today I am breaking down the 10 worst pieces of advice I have ever heard when it comes to writing diverse characters. Do not follow any of these so-called helpful tips because they will sour your reader's opinion of you and your book. Number 1, if you're afraid of writing diverse characters, then don't. Don't write any characters of color or LGBTQ+ characters or disabled characters or even women. Just make everyone an able-bodied, neurotypical cishet white guy. Look, I understand the fear and trepidation, okay? Been there, done that. No one wants to be accused of being a bigot because they goofed on writing a character. But you're being a coward. And you're going to be accused of bigotry anyway because you are excluding those people from your novel. And on a coldly self-centered note, you're also excluding those potential readers. Number 2, if you do include diverse characters, then you must include every single minority identity in the world. If you leave out even a single letter on that LGBTQIA+ rainbow, you're a bigot. That is not possible. Trying to cram as much diversity as possible into a single story is going to feel contrived, and your readers are going to pick up on it. They'll know that you're only doing this as like a checklist or for brownie diversity points. They're not going to appreciate being represented as a token that only exists so you can pat yourself on the back. And each of these characters will have no time to properly shine or contribute to the plot before it's on to the next character for your diversity checklist. It is much better to have one minority character that is fully fleshed out and feels real and three-dimensional than to have 10 really flat minor diversity characters. Number 3, people are so sensitive these days. Someone is going to get offended by your novel. So if anyone tells you that your portrayal of a minority character is harmful, even if they are a member of that minority community and are backing up their claim with a mountain of evidence and historical precedent, then you should completely ignore them. They just don't understand your vision. No one person can speak for an entire community, alright? And not every person in a wheelchair is going to universally like or hate your character who uses a wheelchair. But generally speaking, if 2 or more beta readers from a minority community are telling you that there is a problem with this minority character, then you have a problem with that minority character and you should fix it. You don't get to use the misunderstood writer act or even the tough, brave writer who writes people as they are act just to justify being an asshole to minority groups. Accidentally falling into stereotypes in your writing does not necessarily make you a bigot. The first time, anyway. But I guarantee if you publish that, your readers will think you are a bigot. And if you double down and keep writing that type of stereotype in your writing, well, then now you kind of are a bigot. And that is a much harder habit to break. When you have a working draft of your novel that includes a minority character, recruit as many beta readers from that minority community as possible. These are called sensitivity readers. They'll help you avoid hurtful cliches concerning that character and also help with some historical accuracy if your novel takes place in actual Earth, present day, or historical fiction. And then listen to what they have to say and incorporate their feedback into your revisions. That is the whole reason you asked for their advice in the first place. Number 4, you don't have to do any research into the stereotypes or cliches and overused tropes of whatever minority group you're thinking of including. Just write them as humans, whatever that definition means to you. Bury your gays, the magical Negro? Never heard of him. You go kill off that black gay side character who only existed to give helpful advice to your white main character. It'll be fine. They were not fine. One thing I learned when writing Citadel, my science fiction novel that comes out next year, is that there are a lot of literary tropes and cliches about autistic people and other neurodivergents that we consider normal. Even accurate portrayals of all types of autism, but they're actually quite harmful. And I learned this because I googled autistic stereotypes before writing my main character as autistic. So let's say you are writing an autistic character for your science fiction or fantasy story, but you yourself are neurotypical. You don't have autism. Research all of the tropes and stereotypes that are associated with that type of character. Make a list, memorize that list, and then write your character as far away from those stereotypes as possible within the confines of your story. It's honestly really easy. Not only will you be crafting a character who feels real rather than overused or two-dimensional or tired, you're also creating something new, something that your audience has never seen before. And that is exactly the type of thing that you want to deliver to your audience. Number 5, none of your diverse characters can have pleasant, fulfilling lives outside of your main privileged hero. Everyone knows that real people of color are absolutely miserable in poor, crime-ridden neighborhoods until a white savior shows up to get them out, and that gay men only exist to be the friends of stressed-out straight women, and that women are absolutely miserable without a man in their life. Have you heard of the Makomori test? If you're a regular on this channel, then you definitely have. The Makomori test was originally designed for women characters named after Makomori from Pacific Rim, but it works equally well for any other type of minority character. The original test is you must have at least one woman in your story who has a complete narrative arc that does not revolve around a guy. Swap out those identities as needed. At least one black character who has a narrative arc that does not revolve around a white character. At least one queer character whose narrative arc does not revolve around a cis-het character, etc. Ensuring that your diverse character passes their version of the Makomori test will make them feel much more real, will improve the quality of your novel, and your audience, especially the ones who shared that specific minority identity with that character, will definitely appreciate it. Number 6, writing a minority character and then killing them off will in no way make your audience feel betrayed, and it totally counts as writing diversity. No, it does not. At least not positive diversity. Minority characters have a long, tired history of being killed off in media. It's either because they're the villain and they need to be punished for their minority status, is the subtext there, or their death is what inspires the white cishet male character to go do the plot. Bury your gays trope is when you kill off every single queer character in your story or make sure that they do not have a happy ending because you break up all the same-sex couples. Woman in the refrigerator, aka fridging, is when you kill off a woman character specifically to motivate a man. Black guy dies first, most common in horror movies, but does happen in science fiction and fantasy, is when you kill off the black guy first. Although, it should be noted that Hollywood has grown savvy to this one, so they don't kill the black guy first, but they still kill him off before the end of the story, usually before Act 3. This is called negative or harmful representation, where the minority character exists in the story, yes, but they are portrayed as villainous or killed for the benefit of the privileged characters. I want you to treat killing your minority character as if you have not even written them at all. It does not count towards your diversity points. In fact, it takes them away. If you want to kill off minority characters because it makes for a more compelling narrative arc or a more compelling story, great! There are ways to do that. I've got 2 pieces of advice for you. Number 1, you do it in a way that avoids the aforementioned tropes. They are killed because of their decisions, not for the narrative benefit of the privileged characters, and at the end of their own fulfilling narrative arc. And number 2, you ensure that they are not the only character of that minority status in the story. So if you're killing off a black guy, make sure at least another black guy survives the end of the story. If you're killing one of your lesbians who have been married for 20 years, you better make sure that her widow has a happy ending and maybe even the start of a new romantic relationship with that bi woman down the street. Number 7, it doesn't matter if you offend people with a bad portrayal, it's your intentions that matter, not the actual impact of your story. Okay, story time. When I was in college, I literally got a bachelor's degree in social justice and history, but yes, there is a social justice bachelor's, and I have it. And one of the things that we learned in my classes is this theory called impact versus intent. The idea is weighing how much your intentions of a certain action should be weighed against the actual impact of those actions. So for example, let's say you and I are riding a bus together and I stumble and I break your toe. My intentions are going to flavor that situation in different ways. If I did it on purpose, then I am a bitch who should probably be arrested for assault because I broke your toe on purpose. If I did it by accident, that's better, but the damage is still done. The toe is still broken. If I deny that the toe is broken, or say it's not that big of a deal, you're just sensitive, well, now I'm a different type of bitch. If I apologize, but then do nothing, well, that's better, but I'm still ultimately leaving the responsibility of fixing that damage to my victim. If I apologize, help you get off the bus, get you to the hospital, and at least try to pay for the medical bills to fix the toe, I think that would universally be accepted as the correct response. It's also the one that completely ignores intent entirely and focuses entirely on impact. It doesn't matter that I did not intend to break your toe, I did it. Now I have to fix it. Doing your research on your specific minority group that you want to portray in your story is going to reduce the chances of you breaking other people's toes, metaphorically of course. But if you slip up anyway, then you should know that the impact and your response to that impact is far more important and will get far more attention than your intention. Number 8, your character's minority status really should be their only personality trait, or at least their most defining trait, because, that's what people are going to remember about them. Right, because majority groups in real life are completely obsessed with their group identity and base their entire personal identity on the fact that they're white, cishet, and Christian. Wait. Group identity is important, as is the relationship that the individual has with their various group identities. But it is not all-consuming. For example, I am a queer Buddhist woman. Yes, all 3 of those identities are very important to me, and yes, being forced to hide or erase any one of those identities would suck. But they're not my entire life. Not every single conversation I have is about being queer or being Buddhist or being a woman. I'm Minnesotan, which means at least half of my conversations are about the weather. Now, if an individual does place an unhealthy amount of emphasis on their group identity, well, this can cause some interesting character developments and narrative arcs when that identity is questioned, challenged, or even threatened. It's how you get those main characters who were originally raised in dystopian or outright evil societies that they thought were totally fine and in the right, and then they switch sides immediately as soon as they realize that, oh shit, we're the baddies, but that still affects their background and how they move forward. Or conversely, this is how you get fallen heroes who lose faith in the moral code upheld by their group that kept them in line. So there are ways to do that, but it's usually if the majority or privileged group identity is the one that's being questioned here. Specifically when it's questioned against a minority or an oppressed group identity. Since the majority group is what's in charge, and in certain societies, that group identity is what keeps you safe. Realizing that you might be French doesn't usually carry the same weight and dangers as realizing you might be gay. Number 9, diverse characters can only exist in your story for a reason. There must be an explicit narrative reason why any one of your characters is not an able-bodied, neurotypical, white, Christian, cishet male. Right, because I know that the only reason that I exist in the world as a queer Buddhist woman is to challenge some cishet's worldview. You don't need a reason to add diversity to your story. Ever. Anyone who says that including a minority character distracts from the story needs to seriously question their worldview. Sometimes adding that diversity or specific minority status enhances the story and its theme. For an uber classic, Night of the Living Dead, the original, Ben was not originally cast as black. That actor was just the best one for the role because he just nailed the audition. But having that character be black makes the story hit different and really helps enhance the themes than if he'd been a white actor. For a more personal example, one of the reasons I made my main character in Citadel nonverbal autistic is because one of the major themes of the story is communication and dialogue. Forcing her to communicate nonverbally gave the rest of the story greater thematic and narrative weight. Now, depending on the setting or even genre of the story, certain minority groups may present narrative challenges. Anyone who wasn't an able-bodied, neurotypical white Christian cishet male in America in 1950s had a much harder time getting through life. So having 2 members of your witch coven be in a secret gay relationship is going to present hurdles. Which is great! I mean, imagine the conflict and narrative tension. On a related note, some people argue that having so many diverse characters in a single setting is unrealistic, when in fact they just don't have that much real diversity in their lives. People in minority groups flock together for safety and solidarity. It is far more unusual for your queer character to not have most of their friends be queer, or for your black character to hang out with a majority white friend group. That is unrealistic. And number 10, each minority character can only have one diverse trait. They cannot be Latino and disabled and bisexual. Stuff like that never happens in real life. You would be surprised. Just for that example, the rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD are higher in queer communities than in cishet communities. They're higher in communities of color than in white communities, and the overlap is even worse percentage-wise. So yeah, having a bisexual Latino with a mental disability like depression, anxiety, or PTSD, very realistic. What we're getting into here is something called intersectionality, which is how different identities, minority and majority, interplay and relate to each other, both is groups and within the same person. A lot of times you find that minority groups are often hateful and discrimination against other minority groups. The queer community is routinely being called out for racism and for creating spaces that are not accessible for people with disabilities. They also like trying to erase my own identity of aromantic and asexual, the same way they've been trying to exclude the bisexual people. J.K. Rowling is a TERF. That stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, who think that women should have rights as long as they have a vagina. Throw in religion and things go completely bonkers. Queer people especially have a very complex relationship with religion, especially Christianity, which has been used to abuse and oppress us. So a lot of them specifically converted away from Christianity, either to a totally different religion or as atheists, while some other members of the queer community are even more staunch in their faith, and then there's everything in between. Humanity is a complex, beautiful tapestry of ideas and identities, alright? Everyone has multiple identities, even those who don't think they do, like the able-bodied, neurotypical, white, Christian, cishet males. Those are all very specific identities, and they're not universally shared. We are raised to think that there is a default setting for humanity, that veering away from those identities in any way, shape, or form is weird or even wrong. But there is no default version of humanity, just as there is no standard way to be human. That's what makes us beautiful. What is the worst advice that you have ever heard about writing diverse characters? Please let me know in the comments. If you're looking for actually helpful advice on how to write diversity, I have an entire playlist dedicated to just that, so please check it out. I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.